We are recording. So yes, so my name is Dr. Tania Caron. I'm a dance woman psychotherapist, and I'm wearing many hats today. I'm coming from being a practitioner as a dance woman psychotherapist for over 16 years and working with the LGBTQ plus community since 2010. And I'm also a lecturer at the University of South Wales in arts, health and wellbeing and performance as part of the faculty of creative industries. And then part of this year was that we applied for some funding to work with Umbrella Cymru for me to do what's called an academic placement. So that means that I got to work in partnership with Umbrella Cymru to provide some workshops and staff training and kind of support looking at arts-based service provision for what we're going to call gender, sexual, and relationship diverse clients. And as part of that, we're also offering a series of body confidence sessions, which are open to anybody who identifies as LGBTQ+ in the community across the UK. We might have some people internationally join as well. And that has been also in partnership with Glitter Cymru, which is a minority ethnic organization here in Wales, focusing on LGBTQ+ people. And they've been amazing, and we're going to be doing some in-person workshops with them as well. So out of this spirit of collaboration, and also I'm part of the USW LGBTQ+ network spectrum, which is a very supportive climate and environment for all staff members in university. And as part of that, we're trying to propose more training and more offerings of workshops like these. So this kind of workshop comes from different angles, and today I have a little smorgasbord. I'm going to try and capture all of this in an hour, and I'm going to give a little bit of a Wales context and some of my impressions of some of the needs right now in terms of working with GSRD clients, and I'm going to explain what that is. I'm going to talk a little bit about dance women psychotherapy and some of the research that's been done across the arts therapies. And I'm also going to give examples from my own research and my own practice with a bit of a case study of some of this material that I used for a book chapter, and then some examples from the current workshops and staff workshops that I've been delivering. Does that sound okay? That sounds ambitious. Yes, I see some thumbs up. Excellent. So without further ado, this is a little bit. I also wanted to include a long-time collaborator and friend, Alison Wren, who can't be with us today, but she's an art therapist based in Scotland, and she is the reason why I started doing these workshops in the first place. In the UK when I first arrived, and giving me that warm welcome of, okay, how can dance women psychotherapy be used with this client group, and how can we kind of do that? And, also including my own identity in that as a queer dance therapist, and we're going to be talking a little bit about that as well. So what is dance women psychotherapy? Yes, so part of the exercise is trying to give an elevator speech of what this is. And for some of you who don't know, dance women psychotherapy is included on the umbrella of arts therapies, and in other countries it's called creative arts therapies, and that's arts, music, drama, poetry, dance movement, and expressive arts therapy, which is a kind of a mixture of different modalities. And these are all postgraduate level professions. You need a master's to do this, and it includes psychotherapeutic theories and movement theories. So the idea is that with dance women psychotherapy, we're looking at body questions. We're looking at how we can make parallels between how we move and how we interact with others. This relationship with our body, which we're going to be talking about that as a topic today. How do we make a deeper connection to our body? How do we maintain that? Or how do we repair very difficult situations that are reflected in our body? And we do that by understanding how we move. There's some dance therapists that use some elements of the dance aspect. There's some dance therapists that focus just on movement, so that's why it's dance/movement in some ways. And in the UK, it's called dance movement psychotherapy, but if you're kind of typing research across the world, it's dance movement therapy. So the idea is that we're using the really powerful aspects of dance, of symbolism, of looking at those parallels of how we analyze our own movement, how we understand our bodies, and how then we can use that as a way to express ourselves and understand how we engage, and also gain new perspectives on current situations. And we work with a wide variety of client groups. I started, like I said to you, in 2010. I used to work with children and working with children with psychiatric disorders and with autism. And then 2010, traveled to Argentina. I'm originally from Puerto Rico, so I've been trained in New York, went to Argentina, walked into this space, this LGBT space, and the director said, we don't know what to do with this women's group. We need something to happen. I was like, well, I'll offer a dance movement therapy group, but I don't want it to be just women. I want it to be inclusive to everyone. And the director was like, fine, just get it done. And it ended up being one of the first DMP sessions ever in the country. And it started to launch my practice and my interest of just bringing the body into the work with the queer community. So first, I'm going to be using the term GSRD, and I know this might be new to some people. And it is quite a relatively new term. And it's come from also the fact that LGBT, I'm freezing, let's see if I'm still moving. Am I still moving? I'm frozen in a very, okay, fine. There we go. LGBTQ plus IAA is getting really long. And there's a very interesting way of like, how do we make this more of an inclusive term? And there's been quite an interesting movement from the psychotherapeutic community. There's several sources on this. Pink Therapy has been using that, this term GSRD. And what does it stand for? So it's gender, sex, so people say sex, some people say sexual, and relationship diversity. So by gender, we look at both including gender identity and gender expression. So our innate sense of our own gender, an embodied sense of our own gender, right? Whether it's male, female, non-binary, and other gender identities. Our gender expression is how we choose to outwardly express that gender. And in terms of sex and sexual, it's very inclusive because it includes sexual behavior, so how we act, sexual identity, whether we identify pansexual, bi, gay, and it also includes sexual attraction, right, which might and might not be equal to sexual behavior. And also it includes biological sex, and includes people who are intersex, who are people who are born with sex characteristics that do not fit typical notions of male and female bodies. And then the R in this is relationship diversity. And that's an interesting paradigm about this term, because it starts to open up a little bit more to, this will include non-monogamous relationships, it will include polyamory, it could include, very kind of, asexual relationships. So it will have different notions of, it opens that space for other expressions, which I think is just really important, right? So that's why it's GSRD, and it's a little bit easier to say, but also it has some flexibility, and maybe this might change in the future. As I think the LGBTQ plus language is the most rapidly evolving language in the world, so it might change, and it might, this is what I love about this, that it keeps being renegotiated depending on, to encompass the whole community. And so Wales, why am I being a bit insistent about this? And what have I observed? I've been in Wales now 6 years, 11 years in the UK, and I'm noticing that Wales needs more arts-based service provisions. The arts, we've proven this in the pandemic, that the arts continue to be a way for people to cope, and a safe haven for many people. And sometimes the arts targets areas and targets people that we are not able to reach through more traditional services. So it's one of the things that I think I feel really passionate about, that we need to really dig deep in Wales on this aspect. And this is part of why I did an academic placement with Umbrella Cymru. We're looking at different ways. We have a music therapist, music therapy student working, doing some of the groups. We're trying to see how this is going to be, trialing this out and see how it goes. We also need for more multicultural intersectional services. This is one aspect about dance movement psychotherapy that I find really important, because we're working non-verbally, and most of the times we're working with symbolism. One of the advantages of that is that you can join a group without necessarily knowing English, right? So that opens up the offer to, this is why, with Glitter Cymru has been really important, because some of their service users, most of their service users are refugees and asylum seekers, and working with the body and then not having to rely on the words then becomes a way to access, for them to access these kind of services. Some of the really important goals of this is to eventually be able to map and to research current offerings to see what the need really is. Where is it, right? So that we're not really preaching the arts from our soapbox, but these services are really tailored into what the community is needing and needing support in right now. Some of the aspects as well is that culturally congruent well-being programs, and really that notion that every single well-being intervention should be really trying to look at cultural nuance and cultural bias, and trying to open up diversity in that sense. And that's why intersectionality comes into play, right? I'm a Puerto Rican queer dance therapist. It'll be very different. We are all multifaceted beings, so we need to actually look at that in our service provision. And also, what I feel really strongly about, and I've learned the hard way, is that we need to have specific training to work with GSRD, because there are, as most of the people here and people in Umbrella Cymru will agree, right? There's a very specific skill set. There's a very specific sensitivity that we need to make safe spaces, to make spaces have less blocks for people in this community. Why? Because a lot of the experiences have been around discrimination and about some, particularly in mental health. It's been quite it hasn't been necessarily a positive experience for everyone who has been trying to access a service. So there is specific training that shouldn't be this ad hoc thing. I found it in arts therapies training. This shouldn't be a one-day thing in psychotherapy training. This should be an embedded part of a curriculum, because gender, sexuality, and relationships are universal. They're not a specific niche client group. This is something that everyone works through and negotiates throughout their life. And finally, I'm going to get off the soapbox in a second so we can get into the nitty-gritty, but I think it's very important, is that we activate allyship. And I'm not only saying that we become allies, that it's only heterosexual and cis people that are being allies. I'm also talking about allyship within the LGBTQ plus community, because we are not exempt from discrimination. We are not exempt of excluding people. So there is kind of an internal training that needs to happen, and also an external training. How do we become an ally? And that's some of the things that I have, come across, being a cis therapist coming into a trans space, for example, and that's been my favorite client group to work with. But also I'm very aware of that, and I'm very aware of how I might be perceived, and how I also need to make a conscious effort to remain an ally, and what that means, right? And that's where I think that's when psychotherapy is really important, and it could be, there's research in music therapy, there's research in art therapy as well, and there's a new book about trans specific music therapy. So it's just really, it's a growing field, but I think there's a real need here in Wales to start thinking a bit outside the box, and at the body as the site for discrimination, and the site for access, and the site for engagement and social engagement. So so if you have any questions throughout, you can always pop them into the chat. But I wanted to just pause here a second and I wanted to ask us to take a movement break. So we're going to have a moment to just connect a bit. I've been talking a lot about connecting to the body, so here's our chance to connect to the body. And so what I wanted to ask us is to, hold on, let me just spotlight myself. There we go. I should be only looking at me right now. So I'm going to ask everyone, we're going to just have a moment to put your hands in front of you, and we're just going to have a little bit of a rub of the hands. And just notice your breath. And we're going to have a moment to, with one hand, we're just going to draw the outline of the other hand. And every single time we go down a finger, we're going to exhale. And up a finger, we inhale, and down. And then we'll do the other hand. Having a moment to just focus on the hands. You can forget about the screen. You can go at your own pace. Just recognizing, becoming present. Now we're going to interlace our hands. I'm just going to give it a bit of a stretch. We're going to let our hands kind of drop on our head a second, and just have a moment to just close your eyes and just have that moment of contact with your head. And bringing the hands in front of us. We're going to unlace the hands and have a little bit of a twist. And we're going to clasp the hands, and we're going to bring our elbows out. And we're just going to have a moment to just press the hands here to a bit of a connection. Excellent, everyone. And exhale and release the tension. Whew. This is an exercise called the 4 Bs of self-settling. Dance therapist called Rena Kornblum. Just putting on the brakes. And we're going to let the hands, we're just going to give ourselves a bit of a squeeze. This is body, it's on brains, breath, brakes and body. And then what I'd love for you to do is just take a moment to see if you can come up with a gesture. So gesture is any kind of thing, or you want to do a shape if you want to move a bit more, that represents an aspect of your identity. Ha! An aspect. Something about your identity that stands out for you. Just have a moment to just explore for yourself. See if we come up with a gesture. Good. So maybe you want to try different aspects. This is something we've been doing in our body confidence course. I'm going to do it in silence. Just in a moment. Try a couple different gestures. Try not to think about it too much, overanalyze it. You go, right, this is the one that suits. Wonderful. So once you have that gesture, I just want you to press save in your head. Press save and just remember it, because we're going to come back. We're going to come back to it. Yeah? Is that all right? It's fine. If you forget it, you can just come up with a new one. But, and just notice that process of what it meant to connect with an aspect of the identity, and then trying to represent that in movement. That's what we're trying to do in different ways. Throughout the workshops that we've been doing. So I'm just going to pull up the presentation now, and Teams are deciding to be very, very, very slow. Does anybody want to write into the chat maybe a word that describes the gesture or something around what that meant? Very simple exercise, right? How do you feel now? How does your body feel? Just write and share that. There you go. So I was saying, feeling connected is important to me, and that's why my gesture represented. Yeah, great. Great. Presence, yeah. That's it. That's okay, Laurie. Great. So some of the aspects of that is I'm often doing that in different workshops. Openness, thanks, Ray. Idea of openness and fluidity. Yes. So those are some of the principles from dance psychotherapy. We're working with what the client really brings. I'm not actually inflicting or teaching movement. This, and particularly with GSRD clients, what's been really important is that sense of belonging, that sense of non-judgment, that sense of safety, and that sense of actually coming into terms with being in a space and being seen. And that's some of the themes that I'm going to speak a little bit now. So usually I get, but DMP is not really well known, or there's not a lot of research. And yes, there is. It's been quite recent that there's been a push to look at the role of the body, and there's been different aspects of like body image. Kind of one of the first theses was about working with trans clients and the development of body image. Beautiful literature review is Hanan's. There was a recent survey in 2018 to look at different competencies and the attitudes around that dance therapists had towards LGBTQ plus communities, and one of the findings obviously is that there needs to be more training and more incorporated training, embedded training for them. There's been aspects of the role of being a gay dance therapist, and how this idea of disclosure, self-disclosure, what are the elements of that? Because when we're working therapeutically with clients, I know not everybody here works in a therapeutic capacity. That's one of the things that most therapists struggle with, whether you disclose, whether you don't disclose, whether you correct somebody when they're getting your gender identity wrong or your sexual orientation wrong. How do you confront that? How do you manage that? How do you challenge problematic notions of gender and sexuality in a therapeutic space? So it's just, I just wanted to do a little brief kind of drive-by through some of the theory, and then over in the arts therapies research, there's been, well, the first one becomes really problematic given the difficulty now with the UK government and their insufficient ban on conversion therapy. But this is kind of some recent research and some of the aspects of that. Because the first thing that people think about with LGBTQ plus research, GSRD research, is, oh, we're going to focus on coming out. But there's so much more than coming out. Coming out is quite a unique element, and it's a lifelong process, as most of you know. But there are other aspects that are at play here that we need to look at in terms of the GSRD community. And then in my research, so we did a workshop called Under the Skin with an art therapist. It was part of this kind of ongoing collaboration in trying to provide more collaborative arts movement spaces for GSRD clients. And Alison and I ran a couple of workshops and then started to have lots of interesting discussions and debates around what is there other than coming out. And we used different media to throughout the workshops and throughout our practice to elicit some of different aspects of queer experiences in a room, right? And we came up with some key themes that we found that are universal themes. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel here. What we're trying to do is actually look at, right, these are some nuances. These are some really interesting details and peeks, a peek into a particular need that worked out really well and that elicited a lot of positive response from our clients. And some of these are very recognizable, right? The idea of safety and, safe and unsafe. How do we create a safe space for our clients, which is quite obvious, but it's never necessarily the case. And then a really interesting theme I've been seeing on and on and on, it's really, really, really common, is the idea of visibility. And we're looking at that today, isn't it, as part of IDHOBIT. So what does visibility mean? And what are the consequences of visibility, right? What are the consequences as a facilitator, as a therapist, as a performer, right? As a participant? And that there's a kind of an internal pressure, right, to become visible, right? And the activists in us, you need to come, the International Coming Out Day and all these events. Also, this is a process of being seen always has a consequence, isn't it? And being seen is a risk, right? And that's been coming into play in particularly my workshops, because they've been online. So they're having people on the screens also mean that you're always visible, right? You can always choose. I mean, there's some people that come, I always say that you can hide in the camera. The camera does allow that flexibility to do that. But there's a really interesting, beautiful topic about, sometimes I feel invisible. How do I make myself visible? What are the things, the aspects of that, of my identity that I want to bring to the forefront? How do I present myself and present my truth and be accepted in that truth, right? And the third theme here was also about, we represented this with a beautiful myth called, story, I don't know if people know it, the Selkie Bride. Does anybody know the Selkie Bride? So we used quite a Celtic Norwegian. It's quite an international story of, I don't know if you knew it, but it's like there's a seal that takes off her skin and becomes a woman, and then this fisherman falls in love with her and holds the skin captive, and has a family, they fall in love, but then she finds her skin, she finds her true self, and then she has a choice of whether having to leave her family and go back into the sea where she belongs, right? Where she chooses in the end. So we use that that story about, you know, the pressures of of living our truth and the consequences with family, or having to leave our families, or abandon, you know, or making a choice to live with our chosen family in the sea, you know. So we use some of those aspects in our practice to have people role play, and also to have people represent that in their own way. So we had this is quite interesting in terms of the pandemic, because we've done this workshop in China, and we used non-latex gloves for people who were allergic, but we used gloves. And then the art therapist and I were working on the participants decorated the gloves in terms of the internal essence, what they feel is their truth. And then we have movement with that, and we had different interactions with those gloves. And how interesting then in the pandemic, how that then becomes a barrier and a protection, isn't it? Back when latex gloves were the rage. So these are kind of examples from the ways that we've used story, visual art, and movement to then provide spaces of reflection, provide a space of support for GSRD clients. Yeah. So how's everybody doing? Are we doing okay? Do I see any questions in the chat? Yeah, I see some thumbs up. Yeah, so then I'm trying to decide whether we're gonna come back. No, I'm gonna jump we're gonna come back into our gestures. I'm just gonna do, if you hold on with me, I wanted to talk a little bit of the body questions. So this definition that I gave you in the beginning has been my definition of DMT, which I kind of cultivated. Is kind of I wanted to have my own. And one of the things that I found really, really, really special is the idea of working with a body question. So a question that your body proposes to you, a question your body proposes to other, and also questions that we're asking our body. So it's kind of a different layers of body questions that I find are really, really interesting to see as a lens in these kinds of groups and working with GSRD clients. And here's the idea of the non-conforming body. So some of the, you know, and I'm going, and again, each of these are a thesis on themselves, in themselves. This idea about working with the body that has a high probability of having, you know, violent interactions done onto them and discrimination, and that has quite a big impact on how we traverse through the world. If we're always anticipating there might be some kind of incident, if we need to gauge for safety before we hold our loved one's hand, right? So there is a consequence on the body of that discrimination and that violence. One of my favorite, well, you know, not favorite, but, you know, my wonderful anecdote was I ran a 2-day workshop, a voice and body workshop with young people and trans young people. And one of the clients came over and he said to me, well, I want to say hi. And I said, you know, what's really bothering you right now? What's really annoying? And he said, I want to be able to go into and get on the bus and say good morning to the driver, and that he says good morning, lads, right? And I was like, okay, right. And what's stopping you from doing it? No, I just don't, you know, there was all this fear about just saying good morning. And he said, oh, I just feel I'm being really rude and I just want to say good morning to the driver. So we did this whole, that prompted a big U-turn into the group. And I said, okay, right. So we're gonna practice walking towards someone and saying, I am, and looking at the body and how, in relationship to that I am. Is it an I am? Is it an I am? Is it a very, you know, a confrontational one? Or is it just a neutral, this is who I am, right? So we were looking at how, the idea between proximity and the idea between distance and the cultural notions of that, and just practicing. And for the participants in the room, that it became this really, really interesting exercise of just standing on our own 2 feet and just presenting of who we were, and without an apology, without kind of a being in your face, right, or being aggressive, just being in our own 2 feet. And that made such a big difference. And it was a simple movement exercise. I always smile when I think about that, because it's just walking, right? And next day he comes back, because it was I said good morning to the driver, and I was like, we all cheered, and we kind of supported him, and it was really, really important for him. And that's just an example of a body question, right? This is something that we're asking of ourselves. The initial prompt, when I had to go through quite, I think I call it like an audition process within the LGBT organization I was in, kind of working with different types of groups. And when they deemed me safe, then I was asked to do the transcript. I felt like it was an honor of like, okay, right, can you do this? And one of the prompts were that the clients, the service users, were asking for deportment classes. They wanted me to do, they wanted somebody to teach them to move more like women or a role like me. And I said, absolutely not. I was like, no, I'm not doing that. And the mental health coordinator said, no, don't worry. We're not doing that. What I would like you to do is to have a space to experiment with cultural notions of gender and gender expression, and put that on its head and challenge that. And I was like, okay, right, that I can do. And that's the body question, about the self-identification in the body. What I wanted people to do was to play, and we got really absurd. Most of the debates were around music, which was really interesting. What's masculine music or hyper masculine music, and what's hyper feminine, and laugh at that, be uncomfortable by that, and it's not something that I would recommend people here to do unless they really feel that it's safe enough within the group, because it could be quite triggering to people. But we had worked a rapport, and we had developed a relationship where we could get into those kind of uncomfortable conversations. Because I said, I don't really know what a woman moves like. I can't actually teach somebody that. It felt really uncomfortable to me. But making fun of it, challenging it, exploring it, and finding your own way to discover that was the beautiful journey. That's the journey of self-identification. And looking at, that body question, there's always going to be a gender expectation in a social script, which I find ridiculous. But these are the things, and it's going to evolve and change in different spaces that we traverse, right? And also, it's very interesting to me, as kind of the movement analysis nerd, that what is deemed feminine and what is deemed masculine in movement? What are the things? What are the movement equivalents? What is typical and what is demanded, and how then there's a big pressure on bodies to act and move a certain way, right? And then obviously now we have social media to contend with, right? So it becomes very, 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 very challenging. Are we okay? I just wanted to, I'm going to just dip into the body questions that I experienced, and I'm still kind of exploring with when I worked with my trans clients, right? And some of these are still the same. Some of the assessments are quite were shared across different groups, because I always try to have very inclusive, open groups, right? But these were very interesting to me, and I think it will be my lifelong journey to work in this way. So some of the things that I found in my practice and themes, right, the commonalities were on body image. And as I talked about, previously, there was a thesis on body image, which I found really interesting. But the question then becomes, how do I perceive my body, and then how do others perceive the body? So the confirmation, or the acceptance, the outward acceptance is very important as well. And some of the things that I've found, which is, it could be quite common, but not necessarily in every case. So I'm not going to generalize about all my clients and about trans people in general. But because this could happen in any client group, right? The idea of body dysmorphia is discomfort and distress related to the body. So one of the questions that I propose in the groups that I did in Scotland was, how do we cope? How do we manage? How do we negotiate that? Particularly if we're negotiating gender identity and the body, right? And there's a beautiful, difficult negotiation between acceptance and rejection of the body. Sometimes there's dissociation of different body parts. So I work a very different way. We have to work in a very, it's a kind of client-based and very, we work from where the clients are comfortable with in terms of their body. And sometimes some clients might be completely uncomfortable in their body. And this is not only with trans clients, I think this is in general. So I'm used to working with people who are not movers, or everybody's a mover, but who don't consider themselves a mover, or who might not think about moving in an expressive way in a day-to-day basis. I do that as part of the Body Hotel, which is is my company. I work with employee well-being. So I work with people who are behind a desk all day in the NHS. So this idea about how do we negotiate, or how do we sometimes dissociate our body, right? Because we become little squares on the screen, is very important. And then a specific aspect of the practice, which came up, is also managing sometimes with it. Not all trans clients will undergo gender affirming treatments or hormone treatments, or will have binders, for example. So trans male clients will have binders, which will impact breathing. So one of my co-facilitators found that out. Obviously working with the voice involved a lot of breath work, and it was very uncomfortable. So there were a lot of different situations where we needed to really start small, really start working with. Then how do we manage that? How do we then help someone breathe in a different way and find new ways of interacting, or and negotiating the impacts that the hormone treatments will have. Again, this is not universal for every trans person, but it's just been some of the different cases and considerations that if you're looking at working with GSRD clients, that you need to take into consideration. It's not a one-size-fits-all kind of intervention ever. This is why I think there's more and more need for more understanding, more awareness, and more education. And then I go back, then just going to come back into our movement identity. I wanted to, our identity gesture. So I just wanted to have us come back. and I had a series of different proposals. So if you go back into the gesture, for those of you who joined us a bit later, if you go back into your original gesture, I want you to have it consider, we did that. So just have a moment to look at the aspects of that are facing you. So the elements of that gesture that's facing you, and the elements of that gesture is facing others. Just have a moment of that. And if you're in the screen, you'll be able to see yourself, at least. And what is being shown, or the parts that are being shown into the screen. Mine are really dynamic because I'm in this. And then the extra layer here is what makes this aspect of your identity gesture safe or unsafe to show others, yourself. What aspects are visible and invisible? And what does it look like? So how does it, you can see it from the outside. And how does it feel like from the inside? Right? So you can have a moment to close your eyes and register that gesture. and then open your eyes and see how it's perceived. And just have a moment to just reflect on that, what that feels like. So I wanted to leave a little space for questions or comments from people. I'm always, this is always up for debate, and I am learning and I am growing, and I don't get it right all the time. I promise, and I know there's a lot of students here, so I do want to say we do get it wrong, and any aspect of an encounter or maybe a challenge is an opportunity to grow as well. And I've had to grow as a facilitator a lot, and I've gotten it wrong. I've had to rupture. There's been ruptures in relationships. There's been misunderstandings in groups, and I think that's just part of being willing to accept that and really willing to work through the mistakes and repair relationships. I think that's really, really important, right? Because we're not going to get it right the whole time. Yes, so without further ado, this is just, I just wanted to, a couple of things just wanted to say before we go. So I have an ongoing group, Body Confidence, and people who identify as LGBTQ+, and GSRD are free to join. We have 2 more sessions, one today at 6 p.m. and the next one is next Tuesday as well. And for those of you who identify as an ethnic minority and LGBTQ+, or intersectionality, this Saturday for Glitter Cymru, I'm doing an in-person taster. So we're going to actually get into the space and go through some of the techniques that we've been going through in the workshops. It should be very exciting. And yeah, so yeah, that's me. So I just wanted to see if people had questions, or I'm going to stop presenting so you can see. But does anybody, I mean, you can just unmute. You can unmute yourself. You can raise the hand thing. Hi, Olivia. Yeah.
Hi, Tanya. Really nice to meet you in person. I just wanted to say thank you. It's so nice that somebody within DMT is doing this work, and I'm just really grateful for the space that you're holding as a person that's developing this. I'm speaking as a queer person, but also as the mother of a trans girl. Yes, trying to walk the balance between not occupying too much space as the parent, but also tearing my hair out most of the time around the current climate and everywhere. And yeah, I just really appreciate it. I just wanted to say
thanks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Any other questions around?
I'd like to second that as well. It was so nice to hear you say that you made mistakes, because when we had to write why we wanted to attend this workshop, I thought, oh God, all the times I misread somebody and did deliberately obstruct their development, but may have stood in their way in some way, may have disheartened them in some way. And over 30 years that happens. It's so nice to hear someone else say, well, we do that, Yeah. The most important thing is to try and repair that.
Yeah. And asking our clients, how can we be an ally? Because that's one of the things. It's like, I can't tell you how I'm going to be your ally. It's like, this is how I'm going to be an ally. And it doesn't really work like that, does it? Being an ally, you have to listen to how other people want to be supported. Right? It's not our own mission. Sometimes it's like, oh yeah, I'm an ally. Well, are you? Yeah. So it is about that meeting space, and also, it's been really fascinating as a facilitator, just examining gender and gender language, and trying to really, learn people's pronouns and spend time and doing that. It's really, really important. And confronting also other therapists who go, oh, that's very trendy, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, trying to negotiate that, because that's the difficult bit. Difficult bit is I think as facilitators, as teachers, as people who hold the space for anybody else, you need to keep learning. And learning means that you're going to get it wrong. But yeah. But the importance of that, and I've encountered that with my own language, because Spanish is a gender language. So I've had to now in workshops, I've had to actually there's A and O, which are, you know, masculine and feminine, and there's an E now, which is non-binary and gender neutral, but that means I had to reconfigure the whole language. So I had to do another presentation. I'm like, this is going to be my challenge. I'm going to say everything with an E, right? And how and practice that, and it just expands your abilities, isn't it? There's a question here. Do you have any recommendations for engaging further with the topic? Well, I think I'm gonna. Well, I have a bunch of links that I'm gonna paste into the chat for you. I'm very excited that Stonewall just did a new glossary in Welsh. Stonewall Cymru did one in Welsh and English. And here are some resources now so a bunch of links going your way right now. But you know, I tend to gravitate towards Stonewall as a, you know, as a resource, but in Pink Therapy is a resource as well. Umbrella Cymru has a lot of really beautiful resources. Anna Clark, who's here, did the Gender Construction Kit. It's an incredible tool. Sorry, for yeah, it's just, Anna should be really proud. This is a really important resource. So there are things here, particularly in Wales, that you can access, and yeah, so there are different spaces. Umbrella has a lot of groups for students. You know, it's really important that maybe you contact your lecturers and also go, I want to have more exposure. Can I mentor something? You know, can I shadow you? Can I have a conversation? Can I go into, you know, and hopefully there's more of an offering that can have a space. I have a music therapy intern coming to my body confidence sessions, who's amazing. And I've had different students come in to do that, because also, you know, you have to explain it to a student, so it really enhances your practice discussing sessions with students. Excellent. Oh, interesting. Yes, about contact improvisation. There's a new, this is going to sound like a shameless plug, but I'm the new co-editor of the American Dance Therapy Journal. And we just had an article published on contact improvisation, and, you know, a research, kind of practice-based research that they did, a group of practitioners did around authentic movement and contact improvisation, and the aspect of touch, because touch has been quite tricky subject in the arts therapies. So it's really interesting. The session I'm holding is online. It's I think in the link tree, the Body Hotel link tree link, it has the booking link. So there's still spaces available if you want to come and join. It's been a beautiful group. It's been the highlight of my month to do these groups, and I hope that they continue. So yeah, 6 to 7 p.m. and I see the Umbrella Cymru staff has come forward as well, and I'm just very grateful to them for their support, and Nick for, you know, allowing the rogue dance therapist to come and offer sessions to the staff and to the clients. Sorry, Phil, did you raise your hand for something? Did you have another question? Okay.
It's just that I can't see the chat, so if there's any, can you email any content out to us, please?
Yeah, actually, if you booked in through, I can just copy this and do a little resource list for the people. So you can get an email from us from the Body Hotel. So you see a random email, and so yes, the gender kit. Thanks, Anna. Brilliant. I love it. Every single time I go in, I'm just like, oh, it's just brilliant. So Anna's putting in it's genderkit.org.uk, the gender construction kit. And yeah, so lots of thank yous to USW for allowing me that space, to Umbrella Cymru, to you for taking time out of your busy day to join me. And hopefully there'll be more of this space and we'll be able to do more workshops like this. Thank you to the LGBT staff network and to Glitter as well for always supporting the work, and believing in movement, which is not easy to sell, to ask people to go, oh, can you move? They're like, no. So it's been incredible that people just are willing to explore, to be open and go a bit outside the comfort zone to share the space. So have a wonderful rest of the day. You can always email me if you have questions or for resources. You can email me through the university if you're a university student, so you can find me. I'm the only Tanya with a TH. And if not, for everyone else, you can contact me through the Body Hotel at gmail.com. Brilliant. Have a great rest of the day, and thank you so much.